Good morning, good morning. Buenos dias. It is Monday. It's Monday it's the first Monday of Hispanic Heritage Month. Do you all celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month? Do you celebrate it at work? Do you celebrate it personally with your friends, your family? And if you do celebrate, how do you celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month? So yesterday was September 15th, Hispanic Heritage Month kicks off September 15th every year, September 15th through October. And it's one of those things that I think is important. It's just like when we celebrate Black History Month. I think it's important to celebrate, to learn, to educate ourselves on different cultures, different stories, different backgrounds. I think the more that we learn about each other and each other's cultures, each other's everything, I think that then that's how we learn that we actually do have a lot more in common than we thought. So I like to celebrate, especially at work. I like to encourage people to celebrate all the different history months. But this month is Hispanic Heritage Month. I am from El Salvador. My parents, they were born in El Salvador in the 60s. There was a civil war in El Salvador that erupted in the 80s. And my parents, they didn't know each other then at that time, but my parents thought that they wanted to escape. They heard about the United States and how the United States had more opportunities for them. They were going to be able to make more money and be able to help take care of their families. My parents come from very, very low income families. So it's not like they had money out there or anything like that. My parents lived in El Campo, which a lot of us now, we go visit our families in El Salvador where they live at. And if your family lives in El Campo, you know that that's the poorest way that your family would live. So that's how my family lived. Very, very poor. My mom was the oldest daughter, like 8 kids, I think, or something like that. And then my dad was like, I don't think he was the oldest, but I think he was like somewhere around the middle. And then my parents met in Texas. I think they met in Houston, I think, or something like that. I don't know exactly where, but somewhere in Texas they met. They used to work at a restaurant together. When they met, they then, they were like 15, 16 years old, each one. So they were babies when they met. They really fell in love with each other, started dating and everything. And then boom, she got pregnant. My mom got pregnant with my brother, my older brother. So my older brother was born in Texas. And then my parents then ended up getting pregnant with me. But by then, my parents had already then suggested, my dad had told my mom, let's move to DC because they pay more in DC. This was back in the 80s. My dad said to my mom, they pay more in DC, so I think we should go to DC. I have a brother out there who is already in DC. He could help us get a job. He could help us, with a place and all that. So let's just go over there. My mom said, all right, let's go. She's down with whatever her man says. And then immigration came to my dad's job. My dad worked at a restaurant at that time, and immigration came and arrested everybody who was working there who didn't have papers, which apparently almost the whole staff. And as we know, even now today, we can go to a restaurant and majority of the staff has no papers, right? They're illegals. But majority of the staff there had no papers, so they ended up getting arrested. My mom is pregnant by me at this time, and she's like, what the heck? My husband got arrested. He's going to get deported, all of that. My dad ends up getting deported and he goes to El Salvador. So my mom is like, look, I'm just going to have to wait to have my daughter here because I don't want her to be born in El Salvador because I want her to have citizenship of the U.S. and I want her to have all of her benefits, all of the rights that come with being a U.S. citizen. My mom was not a citizen at that time. I think she didn't even, did she? I don't know if she might have had a green card by then. I don't know. Maybe not. My dad didn't have one. So then my mom said, I'm going to wait it out my whole pregnancy so that she could be born in the United States. That's exactly what happened when based on the plan. Then my dad was in El Salvador, and because he got deported. So he was in El Salvador trying to build a life out there. He figured, you know what, maybe the US isn't for me then, because maybe I should start to build a life out here. Whatever. So my mom said, well, once I have the baby, I'm going to go join you in El Salvador so we can just begin our lives. That's exactly what happened. My mom had me here by the time I was like 2 months, where she was able to get on the plane and get moving and all. She ended up buying a one-way ticket to El Salvador and said, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Just going to stay in El Salvador. Well, my mom hated El Salvador. She tells us the stories all the time. She's like, it was the worst time of her life, especially back then. We're talking about the 80s, y'all. We're not talking about today, where we have Nayib Bukele, who has just changed the country all the way around. Like El Salvador back in the 80s, from what my mom tells me, and even stories and videos and stuff that I see of what El Salvador used to be back in the day, I'm like, it's a totally different El Salvador. We're talking about gang infested. We're talking about the military, just the war, the civil war. I mean, everything. Like, imagine you coming out of your home today and just seeing bodies just laying out on your yard, on trees, just being hung on trees and everything. Like, it's crazy. Like, the stories that I hear about the war in El Salvador, man, I'm like, wow, that sounds so gruesome. It sounds scary. My mom tells me stories about how like los guerrilleros will come knock on her door in her home. Now, mind you, like my parents were poor, so they didn't even have brick houses or anything. They had little champitas and like little houses that were not strong enough. But my mom was like, they would come knock on their door. My mom was like, we were in deep prayer, like trying to ask God, like, don't open the door because we don't want the boys to get taken, because if they get taken, then they go into the war. And if the women get taken, then they end up getting raped. And it was just a whole mess, like a whole mess. So my mom goes back to El Salvador, and then she's like, my mom is like, I don't like it here. El Salvador is not my thing. I don't like the way that we're living here. It's just, it's not my thing. I want to go back to the US. Of course, my dad is there in El Salvador now, but he's got no papers, so he can't come to the US just that easy. He has to come por tierra. He has to come illegally, which a lot of people do. And my dad ended up hating El Salvador too back in the day. This was in the 80s. He hated living in El Salvador too, because the money just wasn't even right, and opportunities weren't there. I mean, just everything. Back in the day in El Salvador, the opportunities that they had compared to now, to what Nayib Bukele is doing, is a complete 180. So my mom was like that. She convinced my dad to come back to the US. So she did. They came back illegally, of course, and they were up here 2 years without me and my brothers. They wanted to set up life for bringing us up here again, because they were like, we don't want to put our kids in any harm's way. They're still young. They're still small. So we're going to leave them with our grandma, with my mom's mom. And my mom said that once they got to the US, it was all right, all hands on deck. Now it's time to hustle. Now it's time to do whatever we need to do in order to make sure that we can bring our kids back to the US, and to make sure that we can have a better living, have a good living. So that's exactly what they did. My parents hustled and bustled for 2 years, and then brought me and my older brother back to the US. We came back to DC. And then when we came back, my parents just started the process of, okay, how can we obtain our paperwork? We need our papers. My mom was able to get my dad, I think eventually he did, but I don't know exactly when he got his papers, but he ended up getting his papers. My mom started working towards becoming a citizen. By this time, I was already like a young kid. I was maybe like I think I was maybe like 5, 6 years old, something like that. I remember my parents going to night school, and my parents ended up going to night school. They worked. Mind you, my parents do not work these fancy corporate jobs. My parents have always worked. My mom has always worked in a hotel as a housekeeper. My dad worked in labor intense jobs. So we're talking about construction, restaurants, these type of jobs. So it's not like my parents, they didn't have any formal education, not even in El Salvador. My parents had maybe third, fourth grade education, and then they had to work. They had to help their parents help take care of their families, help sustain their families, which, I feel bad that my parents had to do that, because I'm like, y'all didn't even get a chance to be kids. Like, y'all were robbed of y'all childhood. And that honestly makes me sad, because I look at my kids and I could never see my kids working at such a young age, at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, working in order to help to maintain our family, to keep our family up and everything. I couldn't see myself doing that. But at that time, you had to do what you had to do, So my parents ended up going to night school, got their my mom got her citizenship. My dad never did, but my dad did become a resident, but my mom became a citizen. And now, she's been a citizen for 30 something years. And now she enjoys all the benefits of being a citizen. But I am grateful that my parents had me here in the United States, because I do have a lot of opportunities that other people who weren't born here don't have. And I don't take that at all lightly. I don't take advantage of that or anything, like in a bad way. Like, I definitely take advantage of it. Like, I'm going to make sure that I get my education, that I'm going to have a good job, that I represent my family, and all of that. So I am a first generation in my family to have a corporate job. I was the first in my family to make 6 figures. I'm still, to this day, I still make 6 figures, but I started making 6 figures when I was 29 years old, and now I'm 35. And in my family, that was almost unheard of. It was that just didn't happen because of where my parents come from. My parents come from El Campo in El Salvador, okay? They come from having milpas. They come from having, animals to tend to. They come from just humble backgrounds, humble beginnings. My mom has taken us where she grew up at, and it's very poor. Like, my mom, she grew up, she was born in El Coyolito in El Salvador. So if you are from El Salvador and you visited El Coyolito, maybe now it's changed because of Bukele. He's making changes here and there. But when I went to visit El Coyolito back in 2006 or something like that, it looked so poor, so poor. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe that that's how you live. Like, this is where you lived at. But, you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. And it ain't always gonna be pretty. But I am definitely grateful that my parents had me here, because I do talk to people who weren't born here, and then they share their frustrations, they share their difficulties with me, and they share just everything that they go through. And I think about my parents. I think about what my parents had to go through in order to give us a good life. And I'm thankful and I'm grateful for that. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to enjoy a lot of the things that I do. I wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that I do. So I'm definitely grateful. And this is why I use my voice in the corporate world to tell people, look, we need to do better. We need to definitely better. So this is why Hispanic Heritage Month to me is very important, because I like to talk about these things, especially being a Latina in corporate. A lot of times I am surrounded by people. They don't understand the Latino struggle. They don't know what our parents went through. They might see me today as an HR, and they might see me today as somebody who, wow, she's a Latina, a brown little girl, a Spanish girl, whatever, Hispanic girl, and she's sitting at the table with the big dogs in corporate. But they don't see the struggle that my parents went through and what they instilled in me. And so that is why for me at work, it is very important for me to educate people about about our Latino struggle and about our cultures and everything. So trust and believe, I am definitely always shouting out loud about Latinos, about culture in corporate, because when we are in position to do so, I think that is definitely what we must do. We got to educate people. And I know, a lot of times we might say, oh, whatever, they don't care, whatever. Even if they don't care, you got to still throw it in their face, rub it in their face, because you know what? That is how you are going to learn about it. That is how you are going to be learning about our culture. So Hispanic Heritage Month to me is always used to do that. The whole month, you have September 15th through October 15th to educate your workplace on how you and your culture celebrate your background, your everything. And one thing that I will say that I do is I always talk about how my parents came to this country. Yeah, my parents came to this country as wetbacks. Right? My parents came to this country with nothing. They had to literally start from scratch. No one handed them anything. No one said, here you go, you came to the United States, congratulations, now you've gotten a house, a car, a job, a high-paying job. No one ever said that to my parents. My parents had to work, and so they instilled that in me. You were born in the United States, take advantage of it, get an education, make sure that you go to school, make sure that you can get a high-paying job, make sure that you put our family up high, make sure all of that. So I will always tell you, anytime, any job that I've worked at in corporate, especially when it comes to Hispanic Heritage Month, I'm there. I'm talking about Latinos, I'm talking about our struggles, I'm talking about everything, because as you should, it is your right to do so. And especially if you have the voice to do so, I would say do it. So that's one thing that I will say, that you got to take advantage of your voice. And that is why, for me, it is very important to show up in spaces like this, like TikTok, like other social medias, where I can attract people that look like me, people that have the stories like me. Of course, I want to help everyone. I want to help everyone from every culture. I don't want to just say I'm only putting Latinos in a box and I'm only going to be helping Latinos. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is those are my people. Latinos, those are my people, okay? So I'm going to do whatever I can to help my people move forward. So this is why it's very important for me to use my HR experience and my HR background to educate our Latinos, because our parents come with this scarcity mindset where they say, just be happy with whatever money you get. Don't ruffle any feathers. Calladita te ves más bonita, blah, 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 blah. Like, our parents will try to, because our parents are so used to just putting their head down, working, not saying anything. They don't want to ruffle any feathers. They don't want to have no problems at work. But that's what they try to instill in us. But I learned that I can't be like that. I can't do that. Unfortunately, that's not who I am. I can't stay quiet, especially using my voice, my platform, and the level of where I'm at my job. I can't. I have to speak up about who we are and what we do. Eileen, I love that you're talking about your experience on here. So important. I'm Salvadorian teacher with a similar story as you. Great. Awesome, Eileen. Awesome. Yes. A lot of us Latinos, Hispanics, we have similar stories. And especially if your parents come from El Salvador, you already know that Civil War was a beast. It was brutal to our families, to our parents. A lot of families lost family members and everything. I heard so many horror stories. And even now today, you can even look up online where there are documentaries of El Salvador's Civil War. And you can even see some of the gruesome videos that they have of people just lying on the roads, and it just was horrible. It was scary. I'm like, I cannot imagine living like that. Like, we would never live like that here in the United States. The United States is spoiled because you would never see anything like that go down here. Now, you go to other third world countries, that is like a normal thing. That is very normal. But here, yeah, no, we're spoiled. We definitely, that's why when we see stuff on the news where we're like, oh my gosh, that is so crazy. How is it that, these countries allow things like that's normal to them. That's very normal to people in other countries to witness all these wars and casualties and just bodies laying on the roads and bombs exploding and just all these different things. Like what we got in this country is we've got our own type of civil war, but it's not as gruesome as it is. Like, I mean, we killing each other here. Like you can't even go to school no more. People are killing you in school. So we've got our own set of problems here, which that to us has become normal. And in other countries, they're looking at us like, how y'all killing the kids in school? Like, that don't even make sense. Like, at least kids are out of bounds in other countries. But here, it's like, you can't even send your kids to school nowadays because if not, you're worried about, is my kid going to make it home today? Are we going to get a phone call from school? Is it like, it's crazy. But that's one thing that I will say that my parents always instilled in me, work hard for what you need, blah, 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 which I try to definitely do so. And like I said, I'm the first in my family to have a corporate job. I'm the first in my family to earn 6 figures. I'm the first in my family to even be a corporate leader. I'm the first in my family to do a lot of things, which it's hard being the first one because you got to get it out the mud. You got to be the one to figure it out. Like there's no blueprint, there's no manual. So my goal is to set up my kids so that way they don't have to get it out the mud. My goal is to make sure that my kids can, when they get older, when they are at an age where they feel like they don't need mom and dad, that they're straight. I'm 35 years old, y'all, and I'm still trying to figure life out. I'm still trying to figure it out because I just don't have family members and I don't have parents that I can ask and say, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? Like finances, budgeting, like those are things that I've had to learn. I've gone into debts and everything trying to figure life out because I didn't know how to manage money. I was never taught to do so. That's something that now we teach our kids. Jobs, I didn't know how to interview for jobs before. I'm in HR, so of course I've learned a lot, and this is why I use my platform to talk to people because I think it's important for us to learn a lot of ways and skills that can definitely help us to level up. I don't think that you should stay stagnant where you're at. I think that regardless, whether you were born here in the United States or not, I think that your situation can always change. It may not happen right now. It may be down the road that you might be able to obtain your papers and you might be able to then go to school and get a better job and all of that. Everyone's situation is different. I don't look down on anyone that is not a citizen because my parents were immigrants. So that would be ridiculous of me to look down on someone. But instead, I try to help and I try to be the voice of in any way that I can. So at work, for example, I'm always like, yep, we have Spanish speaking employees who English is not their first language. We need to have translations. I'm always translating at work because I'm thinking about my parents. I think about my parents. My parents don't speak English that well. They don't understand a lot of this corporate office jargon. So a lot of things may go over their heads. So I'm always telling my job, we need to translate all of our documents in Spanish. And then we need to host Spanish speaking only meetings for them so they can understand what's going on, so they can be in the loop of things. And a lot of times I will say I've never at work, I've been very blessed that I've never gotten any pushback to say, like, why are we going to do that? We don't need to do that. That's unnecessary. No, if anything, it's always been applauded. It's always been valued, and it's always been seen in such great light because companies know Latinos, we help to make this country go round and round and round. So we are definitely hardworking and we help to make the money. We hope a lot of these companies get rich. So a lot of times, a lot of things that I've proposed have definitely been approved. and have been put into play. So you guys, if you have, I would definitely encourage you, if your family is still alive, ask them questions about their history, about where they come from, what they did, about their experiences. I think it's very important. And if you can, at work, educate them. Use this month as the excuse, like, hey, it's Hispanic Heritage Month. Let me tell you a little bit about El Salvador Civil War. Let me tell you a little bit about what it's like to be an illegal immigrant. Like, I feel like I was half and half. Like, my parents were immigrants, but I was born here. So I always grew up as like half and half kid where, got both sides of the world. Like, at home, I lived as an immigrant, but at school, I lived like as an American kid, So life is very different. Like, when you're a first gen kid, man, life is different. Life is hard. That's why a lot of us millennials, like, when they say we've been through a lot, we've been through a lot. We've been through a lot. Like, we need compensation for that. We need compensation for that, y'all, because life as a millennial is tough. And then don't let you be a first gen kid, because us first gen kids, man, we got it rough. We got it rough. Like, I was that kid that I had to help my parents translate their documents. I was the kid that my mom would be like, I got to make this phone call to this, I don't know, debt collector or this company or whatever. I need you to speak to them. I'm like 8 years old and I'm like, okay. And my mom would be like, you need to tell them this, that. And I'm over here translating as an 8-year-old kid. Man, talk about PTSD. Talk about trauma. Thank God my kids do not know what that's like to translate certain documents. But I look back and I'm like, how is it that our parents really relied on my 8-year-old brain to translate any sort of documents? Like, I could not do that, but they did, and we got it done somehow, some way. We figured it out, y'all. But that's my story today for Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm definitely going to be getting on here all month so we can talk about Hispanic heritage, because it's important to talk about it. It's important to share our stories. It's important to let people know where we come from. And like I said, we can all see how we are very similar in our stories and our ways. But I'll be back tomorrow. We can definitely chat again. I'm always on here Monday through Wednesdays between 6:20 to like 7 a.m. Eastern time. This is my get ready with me before work, and I like to talk about HR stuff. I like to talk about anything related to career stuff, to anything. I'm a Latina, HR leader, 14 years experience. So I like to share everything that I know about leveling up in your career, about if you have a company, how you can make your company more inclusive, make people feel good, they want to work there, because that's what it's all about. If you like to hear that type of content, follow me, because I like to talk about stuff like that. My videos are not corporate-ish. I like to be more laid back, real talk with a little slang is what I say, and a little bilingual too, because I'm bilingual. So I'll throw a little Spanglish in there too. So if you like that type of content, follow me, and I will see you guys back here tomorrow.